Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. The rumours around Max Verstappen's future continue. New sources emerging today suggesting that Verstappen has given his word to Red Bull that he will stay at the team until the end of 2026. After that, it's potentially a free-for-all to secure Max's signature. Yes, he has a contract until the end of 2028, but we know that contract with various performance-related clauses may not be that steadfast. If Max wants to leave, he will almost certainly be able to leave. And according to certain sources today, he's told Red Bull, look, I'll try the new regulations with you guys. If it fails, I'll probably go to the best team elsewhere. Is that Aston Martin? Could that potentially be Mercedes? Could it happen sooner than then if this upcoming 2025 season is an absolute disaster? Very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Let's start out just here with Kimi Antonelli, I thought, with some interesting words here, really. The question was effectively, look, do you feel like you should be replacing Hamilton, or is that not like the best way to think about it, really? Suggesting that, of course, he should maybe take his own path. I think is what Craig Slater was trying to do here. And Antonelli says, like, saying that I'm replacing Hamilton, I don't think that's really correct. Such a big figure in the sport has done so much. I just feel like I'm the next Mercedes driver. And I think, honestly, Hamilton left Mercedes, right? If Mercedes had kicked out Hamilton and said, look, bad season, Lewis, which would have been outrageous, but you know what I mean. Even Toto Wolff implied this. You guys remember a few months ago when we were talking about these shelf life comments, when Toto was like, well, every driver's got a shelf life. And we were like, I got a second, isn't this the guy that won? Basically, you had all your success with as a driver. But look, sure, every driver at some point is beyond where they used to be, no longer in their prime. It's not like Toto's necessarily wrong with those shelf life comments, but you know, whether Hamilton is no longer capable of winning a championship and delivering those performances, I doubt that. We're seeing what he did in Silverstone and elsewhere when the car was good on those weekends. Vegas was, you know, another example, but of course the qualifying issue that weekend is still a top of mind for some people. And to be fair, the way that Mercedes and Toto talked about it, they did imply that had Hamilton and Russell, you know, let's say Hamilton continued to not flounder but struggle beside Russell to some degree, they would have thought about replacing Lewis for Antonelli. And that would be a very different story, I think. Like, if Mercedes decided to get rid of Hamilton and to bring Antonelli in as their next generation, that would have very much so been, wow, Andrea, like, lots of pressure on here. Like, they've literally kicked out the greatest of all time statistically for you. That's a big pressure. Whereas in this case, Hamilton left, right? So with Hamilton leaving for Ferrari, that meant that, you know, Mercedes had to replace him. And it's not, you know, okay, technically Antonelli's replaced Hamilton, but you see what I'm saying? There's a bit of a distinction there. I feel like there's less pressure on Antonelli in this scenario with Hamilton voluntarily leaving for Ferrari, and therefore they need to find somebody else, as opposed to getting rid of Hamilton and bringing in Antonelli instead. So I think Antonelli's got the right mindset about this. I know that Russell talked about it as well and said that this kid is very quick and he's soon going to be up to speed. How well is he going to do? I think he's going to have some great weekends. He's going to have some not so great weekends. Obviously, Mercedes want him to get up to speed quickly, but of course he has to just feel like, look, next Mercedes driver, do what he can. The car might be good, the car might not be that good. We don't know the answer to those questions as it stands. One thing that may help Antonelli is the arrival of Valtteri Bottas. There's been lots of talk about this from Mercedes over the last couple of days. Bottas, loads of experience at Mercedes, loads of experience alongside Hamilton. Arguably the perfect guy to be a bit of like a driver coach, certainly like a mentality coach to Antonelli. Also understands the team inside and out, what works, what doesn't work, who to talk to about certain things. So I think that may be very valuable for Antonelli, having somebody as experienced as Bottas working with him in that process. At the same time, Bottas ideally would like the drive, wouldn't he, right? So that's the question. I know that Bottas is obviously a stand-up guy, but you know, in an ideal world, I'm sure Bottas has dreams at night of Antonelli underperforming or Russell underperforming, and, you know, Toto saying, you know what, Bottas, we know what you can do, Valtteri, get back in the car. But it's not going to happen, but you know what I'm saying. obviously, look, at the end of the day, they're employing Bottas to be a reserve driver and help out their new star, theoretically. So I'm sure he's going to do exactly that. That's what Valtteri Bottas does, and it may well be helpful to the team at large. Let's get into this Red Bull situation, though. Firstly, just to say here, some of the comparisons in the colours between the red of this year's Ferrari kit and the red of previous Ferrari kits, just because we're expecting these livery images relatively soon. It's been a big conversation topic, right? I saw this image, I think it was from a Racing News 365 article, and look, the colour correction here may be somewhat different, but it's worthy of just looking at this. This red on the left compared to this red on the right is clearly a different red. So, I think we're going to get more like this right-hand side red on the new Ferrari than the left-hand side red. But as I say, there's various colour correction and things like that that will skew this to some extent. Let's talk about this man. Max Verstappen, he says he's back. Here he is in, well, it's a fit of all time, I guess, with the Red Bull cannon hat. And I presume these are AlphaTauri clothes or whatever, right? But here he is, enjoying his time, apparently. He's smiling, so presumably he's having a good time. But we know that Max doesn't really live for these sponsor events. Like, he lives to race cars fast around a track. Now, is he going to stay at Red Bull too much longer? It's been a conversation topic ever since he came into the sport. Certainly once he started to see success, many other drivers, including Hamilton, are in this category as well. It may not make a difference for your guys' perspective, but there is an argument that if you win with multiple teams, that's a more impressive career. You could also argue winning with one team is more impressive because you helped them maintain their dominance, whatever, right? But Hamilton won at McLaren, he won at Mercedes, now he wants to win at Ferrari. That's certainly part of his ambitions, and to some degree, if Verstappen did his whole career at Red Bull, whole career driving new E-cars, people would say, oh, well, he wouldn't have done it at another team. People will always say those type of things. Maybe Max doesn't care about what other people say, and that's probably fair enough. But if the opportunity arises to go elsewhere, to go to a different team and take them to the top, it is a challenge that has excited many drivers in the past, as it did to some degree with Schumacher at Ferrari, and as it is doing to Hamilton at Ferrari today, along with many other great champions as well. Now, Horner is going to stay for a long time. I think there were even rumours over the last couple of months that Ferrari tried to get him relatively recently, Horner, and he was kind of close to going, but then he said, all right, if you pay me this, I'll stay. And that's what he decided to do in the end. So presumably Horner is going to stay with Red Bull, given that he's got the big backing of the Thai side of Red Bull, the Yavidya family. They control the marginal but majority shareholding in the company. And therefore, if, Horner not has them in his pockets, but like if Horner is their boy, basically, they're not going to get rid of him. And if they didn't get rid of him after what happened last February, March, April, May, all the drama with the leaked text and all this, then he ain't going anywhere now. So Horner's there for the long haul. Of course, there was a big rumour last year that Horner wants to kind of split off Red Bull Racing into its own entity outside of the main Red Bull GmbH family and run it himself, because obviously Horner likely looks at Toto and sees the fact that Toto has a 33% shareholding of Mercedes and is a billionaire, and Horner is not a billionaire. So, you know how these two guys are. That's probably a part to play in his mindset right now. He's going to stay for the long haul. I'm sure that he has his ambitions as well. Obviously, they've got to get back to winning ways in addition. Now, I mentioned yesterday that I thought it was Helmut Marko. Maybe it was both, but it was certainly Christian Horner as well. So, if you guys didn't see yesterday's video, Pierre Wache is talking about how in order to maximize the ceiling of the RB21, and it is believed by Pierre Wache at least, that they need to maximize the ceiling for any chance of winning the title against McLaren or Ferrari, because there is a feeling those other cars will be very strong. So Red Bull have to come to a decision whether they sacrifice some ultimate performance for a wider working window, or whether they sacrifice the wider working window and take more risk for the higher overall performance. Verstappen would probably prefer the latter, a car that's more difficult to drive but has a higher theoretical ceiling. Any of Verstappen's teammates would likely prefer the former. Certainly Perez would say that, and maybe Lawson will end up in due course saying that as well. And Horner seems to also prefer the former. He reckons that the car needs a wider operating window. maybe he is speaking from a Constructors' Championship perspective, getting the most out of both drivers. But from a Verstappen perspective, and apparently from the tech boss perspective, that's not what they're going to do. So it's interesting to see this kind of dichotomy at Red Bull when Horner says, yeah, we need a more consistent car, and Washe says, well, sure, but it's got to be still as fast as the others. And that's the risk that Red Bull are currently in the position of taking, where maybe Horner has a certain perspective, Washe has a different perspective, and that may also vary between their drivers. Is it going to be a good car? It's going to be massively important, this, to whether Red Bull can keep hold of Max. Max is the hottest commodity on the driver market if he was to be available in Formula 1. He has a contract until 2028, but we know what contracts are like in Formula 1. They are there to be broken. And as Max says, I've got a contract until 28. That should be the target to finish then. After that, we'll see. It's difficult to know what's happening in 29. Of course, he said that a while ago on the 8th of December, and maybe before, who knows, he said this number of times. But still, that doesn't mean that things could change as they have done in the past. So this was an article here from Auto Racer discussing that Aston Martin's dream of recreating the trio of Verstappen, Newey and Honda does remain. That's the latest theory anyway. It was discussed in the article. Of course, you guys remember the rumours a couple of weeks ago now where reportedly their sponsorship guy by the Daily Mail had been saying that they were getting Max for 2026. Aston Martin denied these rumours, said that there was no truth in them, although there were then rumours that actually maybe it was Aston Martin who leaked the report in the first place to the Daily Mail, because getting the idea out there that they were willing to pay £1 billion to get Verstappen's signature was maybe a story they wanted in the public perception so that people were showing that it was serious. And then Aston Martin say, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, completely unfounded, no idea where you got that from. That goes the theory anyway. I think there's absolutely no doubt with what Aston Martin are building, their state-of-the-art campus, they're getting Honda, they're getting Newey. There's no doubt that when Alonso retires, and Alonso is reportedly treating 2026 as his final season in Formula 1, he will certainly want to drive the Newey car of that generation, and presumably Lance Stroll would as well, and presumably Lance Stroll's father would want him to drive the Newey car of that generation too. However, if Max turns out to be available, then it's potentially a very different story on paper as well, because Alonso, there's no doubt in my mind, when he retires, Aston Martin want Max in his replacement role. That's my opinion. Maybe they even want both at the same time at some point until Alonso potentially moves on. So the rumour goes, as of today from this article, that there are rumours that he has reportedly, Verstappen, given assurances to Red Bull that he will remain until the end of 2026. But it's understood that is far from certain. Russell is potentially available. Alonso may well be out of the team. Who knows what happens there? So there's lots of alternatives here, but reportedly Max has said to Red Bull, hey, I'll drive you in 2025, in 2026 I'll give it a go as well in the brand new set of regulations with, you know, the Ford power unit, the Ford Red Bull powertrains power unit, the new aero not designed by, of course, Newey on the team, so we'll see how that goes, and if that goes well, because you know, Max leaving a team that, let's say this season they win another championship, maybe he wins the drivers again this year, leaving a team in that context, or even if he doesn't, leaving a team that's won 4 of the last 5, 5 of the last 6 championships, whatever, like not something that realistically you might think to do, because, you know, in 2026 maybe they deliver a real special car. But there is a feeling that that is relatively unlikely just compared to the power units that Mercedes or Ferrari or Honda may potentially cook up for that season, the potential fuel advantage that Aston Martin may have working with Aramco, that's a possibility there as well. But Max has apparently said to Red Bull, look, I'm going to give you guys 2 more seasons, this year and next year. After that, we'll see what happens. And as I say, with performance-related clauses, there's absolutely a possibility that Max can basically leave when he wants. I think the big debate is this year, if the car doesn't deliver, and there's lots of speculation behind the scenes on where Mercedes might be and where Aston Martin might be, whether Max will say, hey, I'm actually going to bring that end of 2026 back to end of 2025 and really, ramp up the possibility of rejoining with Newey and Honda and all of that jazz over there at Aston Martin. I think Aston Martin, if Max says, hey, I want to come along, they will find the room. Mercedes, I think, potentially would, but I'm not sure that it's so clear after some of the, Russell Verstappen drama at the end of last season, the feeling that Russell really cemented himself as the team leader, the fact that Antonelli's such a star for the future, and the fact that Mercedes is, quite a political team on some level. I don't know if Max and Jos and that camp would be so eager to join that team compared to maybe an Aston Martin. So I think that's probably why, in all of that context, Max has said, all right, I'll do this year and I'll do next year at Red Bull. After that, we'll see how the lay of the land is. And if Aston Martin really do come out of the gates swinging in 2026, let's say Alonso competes for the driver's title in 2026, Max will very, very likely want to be driving in that car in 2027, I would imagine, given the Honda thing, given the Newey thing, and all of these other factors. And also, we don't know how long Max really intends to stay around anyway. We know that Spa will not be on the calendar in 2028. It's taken a year off that year, and Zandvoort will be gone by then entirely, his home Grand Prix. So we know that, and obviously there's the swearing debacle and all this stuff that's still happening, right? So we know that there are factors pushing Max away from the sport, and if he intends to retire in 2028, which he may well do, I think it makes a great degree of sense, actually, for him to go and drive elsewhere for a couple of years before maybe he decides to do that, go and drive Le Mans, go and do something else, maybe with Aston Martin and with the Valkyrie project and with Fernando Alonso, who even knows. But intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Just one final thing on, therefore, the future of Red Bull and the drivers they may be lining up as a potential replacement. Arvid Lindblad has won the Formula Regional Oceania Championship that he's been racing in. That gives him some good super license points, and I think he won it pretty comfortably in the end. So it goes to show he's definitely a talent for the future. Red Bull will have him in a Formula 1 car, I am convinced. Whether he ever drives the Red Bull Formula 1 car rather than just the AlphaTauri or whatever you want to call it, that is, I suppose, another question. And just one final question while we're on the discussion. I saw this going around today as well. I mean, this is a picture and a half, isn't it? From a few years ago. Which of these three drivers from the same generation will be the first to win an F1 Drivers' Championship? That is still the question for you guys. And I think this season, it's probably between these two fellas on the right-hand side. I don't see Mercedes delivering a car good enough, capable of Russell of winning it. I think Russell is capable of winning a Drivers' Championship in the right car. I think he, does have now the ability to execute reasonably consistently, certainly consistently enough to win a title in a car that's excellent. In a car that's not so excellent, no chance, to be honest. And the excellent cars are presumably for this season going to be the McLaren and the Ferrari, as they were at the end of last year, in which case it's Leclerc and it's Norris. Now, Leclerc, I think, is probably more well-rounded and well put together than Norris is in terms of, delivering a championship challenge. I think you see when Leclerc fights Max on track that he's a level above Lando in that regard for now. Maybe that could change. I think the issue is for Leclerc is that he's got Hamilton as a teammate who theoretically should be very competitive, if not more competitive. I think Lando will again have the measure of Piastri for now. So there are a couple of factors in play that may prevent or provide a World Drivers' Championship for any of these guys this upcoming season. But surely one of these guys at least wins a championship at some point. Who's that going to be first? If I had to put money on it, I'd probably say Leclerc. But I do think there's a very realistic possibility that this season the McLaren is so good that Lando simply cannot not win the championship. You see what I'm saying? So, what a season we've got to come. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. This was from 2010. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.